You hear it before you see it. A high, metallic scream tears across a truck show parking lot or out of a back corner rebuild bay. It is a sound that does not belong to anything built this century. It's not a turbo. It's not a Cascadia. It's an engine the federal government effectively erased from new trucks more than 30 years ago. An engine that burns oil, drinks fuel, and screams loud enough to make people wince. And somewhere in America right now, an owner-operator is paying real money to keep one alive. Why would anyone do that? Why fight for a banned, obsolete, oil-spitting two-stroke when there is a clean, computerized, emissions-legal engine sitting on every dealer lot? The easy answer is nostalgia. Old men, old iron, the good old days. But that is not the reason, and the people rebuilding these things will tell you it is not. The real answer is closer to a quiet rebellion, and it connects to something you almost certainly bought at the grocery store this week without thinking about it. Here is what makes this strange. This engine was not outlawed by name. There is no law that says the Detroit 8V92 is illegal. It was killed in a way that is far more interesting and far harder to undo. The story has 4 layers, and almost everyone who talks about this engine only ever knows the first one. But let's start with what everyone gets wrong about the word banned. Ask 100 people why the 8V92 disappeared, and you will get the same answer: emissions. And they are right, mostly. The Detroit Diesel Series 92 was a two-stroke, and two-strokes have a dirty secret built into their geometry. They burn a little oil on purpose every cycle, and they put more soot and more nitrogen oxide into the air than a comparable four-stroke. By the 1980s, with tightening EPA rules and customers demanding better fuel economy, the entire heavy truck industry was being shoved toward four-stroke engines. The two-strokes days were numbered. Production for the highway wound down through the 1990s, and that was that. So there is your answer. Emissions killed it. Case closed, right? But here's what that explanation quietly skips over. The 8V92 was never banned the way people imagine. No regulator ever pointed at it and said the words. What actually happened is stranger and more permanent. The engine was designed out of existence. New emissions standards arrived. The engine couldn't meet them. And because of how this particular engine works, it couldn't be patched, updated, or bolted with a filter to bring it into line. A four-stroke can be tuned, recalibrated, fitted with modern aftertreatment. The two-stroke's entire breathing system fights that, so it wasn't banned. It was made impossible to legally build new, which is a much deeper kind of death. And that's the part that should stop you, because if the engine simply couldn't compete, it would have vanished completely, the way bad engines always do. Nobody rebuilds a genuinely bad engine 40 years later. Nobody pays a premium for junk. Yet right now, there are shops with waiting lists, marine operators who refuse to repower, and owner-operators who treat a tired 8V92 core like buried treasure. An engine that lost on emissions and lost on fuel economy is being actively resurrected, which means the thing keeping it alive has nothing to do with the reasons it was killed. So what is it? The answer is buried in the one design choice that doomed it. The exact feature that made it illegal is the same feature that makes it nearly immortal. To understand why people love this engine, you have to understand what it actually does, because it does not work like the diesel in your pickup. A normal four-stroke fires once every 2 crankshaft revolutions. The 8V92 fires every single revolution. That's where the scream comes from. At any given speed, it sounds like it is spinning twice as fast as it really is, a banshee wail that earned the whole family its nickname, the Screaming Jimmy. Jimmy was old shorthand for General Motors, which owned Detroit Diesel. But the sound is just a symptom. The real magic is how it breathes. A 2-stroke diesel cannot suck in its own air the way a 4-stroke does. So Detroit bolted on a Roots blower, a mechanical air pump spinning off the engine itself, ramming air through ports cut into the cylinder walls and pushing exhaust out through valves in the head. No waiting on a turbo to spool. Air, always, instantly. And the fuel system used unit injectors, one per cylinder, with no high-pressure fuel lines snaking around the engine at all. Strip it down, and here's what you find. Not many moving parts, no complex electronics, no exhaust gas recirculation, no diesel particulate filter, no tank of diesel exhaust fluid, no computer deciding whether your truck is allowed to make power today. And this is the part that connects to something sitting in your kitchen right now, the cold stuff you bought this week. But we will get to that. Because here's the paradox that makes grown mechanics emotional. The simplicity that made this engine dirty is the exact same simplicity that makes it nearly impossible to kill. A modern emissions engine is a sealed system of sensors and aftertreatment that, when it fails, can leave you stranded and handing a dealer $20,000. The 8V92 can be torn down, measured, and rebuilt on a shop floor by the person who owns it, with hand tools and a manual, again and again, for decades. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need a software update. When something breaks, you fix it, not a technician with a laptop. So the question stops being, why is it dirty? And becomes something far more uncomfortable. If the design is this rebuildable, this beloved, this hard to replace, then why couldn't anyone just clean it up and keep building it? The answer is a story about a company that tried and failed against its own engine. The two-stroke did not show up in 1974 as some experiment. Its bones go back to 1938, when Detroit Diesel, under General Motors, built a two-stroke family that would power tanks in the war, buses across the country, boats, generators, and eventually the long-haul trucks that built the interstate freight system. The Series 92 arrived in 1974 as a bigger bore evolution of the legendary Series 71, and for a while, it was everywhere. This was not a niche engine. This was the sound of American freight for a generation. But by the 1980s, the regulatory wall was coming. And here is the detail almost nobody knows. Detroit did not just shrug and walk away from the two-stroke. The company reportedly poured enormous amounts of money and engineering into trying to make it comply, to civilize the exhaust, to keep its signature engine legal. And it could not. The very geometry that made the thing scream and pull and rebuild so easily refused to be cleaned up enough. In 1987, it launched the Series 60, a conventional four-stroke and the first heavy-duty truck diesel in the world to run fully electronic controls. It went on to become the most successful engine Detroit ever made. And it existed, in part, because the company had given up trying to save the engine that came before it. The four-stroke did not beat the two-stroke in a fair fight. It replaced it because the rules left no other door open. Sit with that, because it reframes everything. The 8V92 wasn't a failure that the market rejected. It was a capable, brutally durable engine that ran straight into a regulatory wall its own manufacturer couldn't climb over, even spending millions to try. Therefore, the people keeping it alive today aren't clinging to something that lost. They're clinging to something that was taken. And that distinction is the whole reason what comes next exists at all. Because that exact feeling, that the good engine was legislated away from you, didn't stay locked in the world of old two-strokes. It spread. And it built an entire underground economy you've been quietly funding every time you buy food. Here's where it lands in your life. When the EPA tightened the screws on diesels in 2002, then harder in 2007 with mandatory particulate filters, then again in 2010 with the systems that need diesel exhaust fluid, a lot of truckers revolted in the most practical way possible. The new engines, they said, were buggy, expensive, and thirsty, with early failures that could cost over $20,000 to sort out. So a whole industry sprang up around the glider kit, a brand new truck body and frame fitted with a rebuilt pre-emissions engine. Companies like Fitzgerald were building and selling thousands of them a year. Even J.B. Hunt, a giant, reportedly bought around 200. These weren't backyard hobbyists. This was the mainstream of trucking voting against its own newest equipment. And the 8V92 sits at the emotional center of that rebellion. The patron saint of "Leave my engine alone" is the most iconic thing emissions law ever erased, and now we're about to see exactly how that lands in your daily life. The fridge in your kitchen, the cold groceries, the produce that crossed the country, all of it moved on diesels, and a meaningful slice of that freight rolls on rebuilt pre-emissions iron specifically chosen to dodge the modern systems. The price you pay at the register carries the cost of fuel, maintenance, and the choices fleets make about which engines to trust. You've been paying into this argument without ever hearing it. But the rebellion isn't clean, and it isn't simple, and pretending otherwise would be a lie. The reason regulators came after these engines is real. Old diesels and glider trucks pump out far more soot and nitrogen oxide than modern certified ones, and the people who live near freight corridors breathe it. By late 2017, the federal government cracked down, capping how many gliders an assembler could build. Both things are true at once. The engine is beloved for honest reasons, and it's restricted for honest reasons. So where does that leave the scream you heard in that parking lot? So here's where you actually land. That engine isn't refusing to die because old men are sentimental. It refuses to die because emissions law removed the engine, but never replaced the thing it gave people: total ownership. The 8V92 can be rebuilt forever by the person who owns it, with no computer's permission, no dealer's invoice, no filter to clog or fluid to run dry. The very feature that made it illegal, that raw, two-stroke simplicity, is exactly why it outlives everything sent to replace it. You started out hearing a loud, wasteful, obsolete machine somebody refused to let go of, but what you were actually hearing was a 1938 design that built the interstate, an engine its own maker spent millions failing to save, a regulatory wall that turned durability into contraband, and a quiet revolt by the people who haul everything you own. That scream isn't nostalgia. It's the sound of a driver who decided that when something breaks, he fixes it. And nobody gets to take that away. You don't see a dead engine anymore. You see the last truly rebuildable diesel in America, and the people who won't bury it. And if you think one banned two-stroke is a strange thing to resurrect, wait until you find out why truckers are quietly hoarding a four-stroke Cat engine the factory stopped making in 2007 and paying more for a worn-out one than it cost brand new.